The distress signal came through every communication channel in known space at exactly the same moment. It was desperate, pleading, and impossible to ignore. The message was simple and heartbreaking. The Velen people needed help. Their colony on Kasara 7 was under attack by the Krethak swarm, and they had maybe 3 days before everyone died. The Velens were a peaceful species. They had never hurt anyone. They mined crystals on their remote colony and traded fairly with everyone. They had no weapons, no military, and no way to defend themselves against the Krethaks. The Krethaks were different. They were a hive mind species that consumed everything in their path. Worlds, stations, entire civilizations had fallen to them. When the Krethaks arrived, you either ran or you died. The Velens couldn't run. They were trapped. The Galactic Council called an emergency meeting within hours. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Grand Chamber on the neutral station of Axiom Prime. The chamber was beautiful, with floating platforms and holographic displays showing the situation at Kasara 7. The displays were not pretty. Hundreds of Krethak ships surrounded the planet. The Velen shields were holding, but barely. The analysis was clear. 3 days. Maybe less. The Thessian ambassador spoke first. Her species was elegant and advanced, known throughout the galaxy for their wisdom and technology. She looked at the data and shook her head slowly. The problem was not the Krethaks, she explained. The problem was getting to Kasara 7. The colony was located in the Ember Wastes, a region of space that was basically a death trap. Stellar storms raged constantly. Gravity wells appeared without warning. Radiation levels could fry electronics in seconds. Most ships that entered the wastes never came out. The Korvax representative stood next. His species was militant and proud, with a military tradition spanning thousands of years. Surely they would help. But the Korvax ambassador crossed his forearms and spoke bluntly. The risk was too high. Even if they could reach Kasara 7, fighting the Krethaks in those conditions would be suicide. His ships were valuable. His soldiers were valuable. The Velens were not worth the cost. One by one, other species gave their reasons. The Prylons were ancient and logical. They had calculated the probability of success at 3%. They did not waste resources on lost causes. The Zentari claimed their ships were not designed for such harsh conditions. The Mulvans said they had their own borders to protect. The excuses continued. Some were honest. Some were cowardly. But the result was the same. Nobody would help. The debate went on for hours. Some species argued about duty and morality. Others talked about strategic importance and resource allocation. A few suggested sending a strongly worded message to the Krethaks, as if words would stop a species that only understood consumption. Through it all, one human sat in the observation gallery and watched with growing anger. Daniel Green was Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. He was a career diplomat who had spent years building relationships with alien species. He understood their cultures, their politics, and their fears. But right now he did not care about any of that. He was watching thousands of innocent people get abandoned because everyone was too scared or too selfish to help. Beside him sat Commander Lisa Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. She was supposed to be quiet and observe. That was the protocol for military officers at council sessions. But her hands were clenched into fists and her jaw was tight. Green leaned toward Hayes and whispered quietly, "They are going to let them die." Hayes nodded once. Her voice was low and angry. "I can see that." The council session ended without any decision to act. The official statement was carefully worded. The Galactic Council expressed deep concern for the Velens. They condemned the Krethaks' aggression. They would monitor the situation closely. But they would not send help. The risk was too great. The location was too dangerous. There were larger considerations at play. As the chamber emptied, several ambassadors approached Green privately. The Thessian ambassador touched his shoulder gently. "I hope your people will not consider anything foolish," she said. "Earth is young in the galactic community. You have so much potential. Do not throw away your future on a mission that cannot succeed." The Korvax ambassador was more direct. "If humans go to Kasara 7, humans will die. Is that what you want?" The Prylon observer spoke last. His voice was emotionless and factual. "We have modeled every scenario. There is no path to victory. If Earth sends ships, those ships will not return. Accept this reality." Green thanked them for their concern. His voice was polite and diplomatic. He had learned long ago how to smile while being angry. But inside he was making calculations of his own, not about probabilities or strategic value, about what kind of species humanity wanted to be. He sent a priority message back to Earth as soon as he reached his quarters. The message was encrypted and direct. It went straight to the Unified Earth Government Council. Green kept it simple. The Galactic Council had refused to help the Velans. 12,000 people would die in 3 days. The galaxy was going to watch it happen and do nothing. What were Earth's orders? The response came back in less than 2 hours. Green read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. Then he smiled for the first time that day. It was not a diplomatic smile. It was the smile of someone who had just gotten permission to do something crazy. He called Commander Hayes to his office. When she arrived, he handed her the message. She read it quickly and her eyes went wide. Then she grinned. They actually said yes, Green nodded. Get back to Earth, tell Admiral Cole to move fast. We have 3 days. Hayes was already heading for the door. Cole will have a fleet ready before I even finish the briefing. As she left, Green sat down at his desk and began composing another message. This one would go to Kasara 7 directly. It would probably take hours to get through the interference of the Ember Wastes. But he needed the Velans to know. Someone had heard them. Someone was coming. On Kasara 7, Vessel Treen huddled in the main bunker with thousands of his people. The shields were failing section by section. The Krethax weapons pounded constantly. The children were crying. The adults were trying to be brave. But everyone knew the truth. They had asked for help and nobody was coming. Treen's communication officer suddenly shouted across the bunker. A message was coming through. It was breaking up badly, but it was there. The officer filtered out the static and played it on speakers. This is Ambassador Daniel Green of Earth, the message said. The voice was human, a species the Velans barely knew. We received your distress call. We are coming to get you. Hold on for 3 days. We will be there. I repeat, we are coming. Hold on. The bunker went silent. Then someone started crying. Not from fear this time, from hope. The humans were coming. Nobody knew much about humans. They were new to the galactic community. They were from a death world called Earth, but they were coming. Treen stood up slowly. He looked at his people and spoke clearly. 3 days. We hold for 3 days. Someone heard us. Back on Earth, Admiral Vincent Cole stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Force. He had just received his orders from the government. Get to Kasara 7, rescue the Velans. Whatever it takes. He looked at the tactical display showing the Ember Wastes. Every calculation said this was impossible. Good thing humans had never been very good at accepting impossible. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. This is Admiral Cole. We have a rescue mission. It is going to be dangerous. It is going to be difficult. A lot of people are saying it cannot be done. But there are 12,000 people who need us, and we are the only ones who answered. So we are going to do the impossible. All ships prepare for immediate deployment. Around Earth, 3 ships began powering up their engines. The galaxy was about to learn something about humanity. When someone called for help, humans did not calculate odds. They did not debate strategy. They did not consider the cost. They just went, and heaven help anyone who got in their way. Earth moved faster than anyone thought possible. Within 6 hours of receiving the distress call, Admiral Vincent Cole had assembled his task force. Within 12 hours, the ships were loaded and crews were aboard. Within 18 hours, the fleet was ready to launch. The rest of the galaxy took weeks to mobilize for military operations. Humans did it in less than a day. Cole had chosen 3 ships for the mission. Each one was designed for the worst conditions space could throw at them. The EDS Valkyrie was the flagship, a heavy assault carrier that could take punishment and keep fighting. Captain Nicole Grant commanded the Valkyrie. She was young for a capital ship commander, only 32, but she had earned her position in the Mars defense campaigns. Her crew trusted her completely. The second ship was the EDS Ranger, a frigate that specialized in electronic warfare. Captain Jake Morrison ran the Ranger like it was an extension of his own body. He was older than Grant, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands. He had been fighting in space since before most of his crew were born. Morrison did not believe in fair fights. He believed in winning. The third ship was the EDS Nomad, a heavy transport and medical vessel. It was armored like a battleship but designed to carry people, not weapons. Captain Ryan Foster commanded the Nomad. Foster was quiet and thoughtful, the kind of officer who spent more time listening than talking. His ship had the best medical bay in the fleet, and he had handpicked every doctor and nurse on board. Cole stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie and watched the final preparations. Around him, crew members moved with practiced efficiency. Everyone knew their job. Everyone understood the stakes. Nobody was pretending this would be easy. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, the chief engineer, approached with his final report. Webb was covered in grease and looked like he had not slept in 20 hours, probably because he had not. All systems are ready, sir. I have pushed the engines past recommended specifications. We will get there faster, but I cannot promise they will not burn out. Cole nodded. Get us there, Webb. We will worry about getting back later. The news of Earth's decision had already spread across the galaxy. The galactic networks were full of commentary. Most of it was negative. The Thessian news channels called it a tragic waste of human potential. The Korvax military analyst predicted total failure. The Prylon observers stated flatly that the human fleet would be destroyed. Some of the comments were cruel. One popular Zentari commentator laughed openly during his broadcast. The humans are idiots, he said. They will fly into the ember wastes and die. The Krethax will barely notice them. This is what happens when a primitive species tries to play hero. But some reactions were different. In the outer colonies where species lived without the protection of the Galactic Council, people watched and hoped. Maybe the humans would prove everyone wrong. Maybe someone would finally stand up to the Krethax. Maybe things could change. On Kessara 7, the Velans had spread the word. Humans were coming. Nobody knew what humans looked like. Nobody knew what human ships could do. But they were coming, and that was enough. Vessel Treen organized his people. They would hold the bunkers for 3 days. They would protect the children. They would trust that the humans would keep their promise. The human fleet launched from Earth orbit with no ceremony. There were no speeches, no crowds, no media coverage. Just 3 ships accelerating hard toward the edge of known space. Inside those ships, over 2,000 men and women prepared for what might be their last mission. In the crew quarters of the Valkyrie, Marines checked their weapons and armor. Sergeant Amy Cross walked between the bunks talking quietly with her people. Cross was a veteran of a dozen ground operations. She was tough, fair, and absolutely fearless. Her Marines would follow her into hell itself, which was probably where they were going. One of the younger Marines, Private Danny Collins, looked nervous. He was 19 and had never seen combat. "Sergeant, do you think we will make it?" Cross sat down next to him. "Honestly, I do not know. But I know we are going to try. And I know that if we do not go, 12,000 people will die for sure. So we go." Collins nodded slowly. "Why did the other species not help?" Cross shrugged. "Because they are not human. They think about odds and calculations. We think about people who need help. That is the difference." On the Ranger, the electronic warfare specialists were running final tests on their equipment. Officer Kevin Brooks was the best hacker in the Earth Defense Force. He could break into almost any system if given enough time. For this mission, he had been working on something special. A virus designed specifically for the Krethax communication network. Captain Morrison stopped by the electronic warfare station. "Will it work?" Brooks looked up from his screens. "Honestly, sir, I have no idea. The Krethax use a hive mind network. It is different from anything we have encountered. But I have built something that should at least confuse them. If we can disrupt their coordination, even for a few minutes, it might be enough." Morrison clapped him on the shoulder. "That is all we need. A few minutes of chaos and we can do a lot of damage." On the Nomad, Dr. Laura Kim was preparing the medical bay for mass casualties. She had beds ready for hundreds of wounded. She had supplies stockpiled for every kind of injury. She had a team of 30 doctors and nurses who were ready for anything. Kim had served in disaster zones all over Earth before joining the Defense Force. She had seen the worst that could happen to human bodies. Now she would see what happened when humans fought aliens in impossible conditions. Captain Foster found her in the medical bay. "Are you ready, Doctor?" Kim looked around at her prepared stations. "As ready as I can be. But we do not know what Velan biology is like. If they are wounded, I will have to figure out their medical needs on the spot." Foster nodded. "You will figure it out. You always do." Admiral Cole called a fleet-wide meeting before they entered faster-than-light travel. His face appeared on every screen in all 3 ships. He looked tired but determined. "I want everyone to understand what we are doing." The Galactic Council refused to help the Velans. Every major species in the galaxy said this mission was impossible. They calculated the odds and decided it was not worth the risk. He paused and looked directly into the camera. But we are human. We do not abandon people just because saving them is hard. We do not calculate the value of lives like they are products on a market. When someone calls for help, we answer. That is what makes us different. That is what makes us human, Cole continued. This will be dangerous. The Ember Wastes will try to kill us before we even reach Kasara 7. The Krethax will definitely try to kill us after we arrive. Some of us might not make it home, but every single one of those 12,000 Velans will know that when they called for help, someone came. They will know that someone cared enough to try. And that matters, he straightened up. All ships, prepare for jump. Next stop, the Ember Wastes. Let us go save some lives. The 3 ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and disappeared from Earth orbit. Behind them, the planet waited and hoped. Ahead of them lay a journey through the most dangerous region of space known to any species. And beyond that, a battle against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations. But the humans did not care about any of that. They had a job to do. People needed them. That was all that mattered. The galaxy called them demons. The galaxy called them fools. The galaxy said they would fail. The humans did not care about that either. They were coming. And nothing was going to stop them. The Ember Wastes earned their reputation within the first hour. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the region, and immediately everything started going wrong. The Valkyrie, leading the formation, was hit by a radiation burst that came out of nowhere. Half the sensor arrays went dark. Alarms screamed across the bridge. Captain Grant held onto her command chair as the ship shuddered. Damage report. Lieutenant Webb's voice came through the communication system from engineering. He sounded stressed but focused. We lost primary sensors. Backup systems are online but operating at 60%. Hull integrity is fine, but we took radiation damage to multiple systems. I am rerouting power now. Before Grant could respond, another alarm sounded. The Ranger nearly collided with an asteroid that had not shown up on any scans. Captain Morrison threw his ship into a hard turn, missing the rock by less than 50 meters. On the Nomad, Captain Foster reported hull stress warnings. The gravitational forces in the wastes were pulling at his ship in ways that should not be possible. Admiral Cole made the decision quickly. Reduce speed by 40%, switch to manual navigation. We will use visual confirmation and backup sensors. It will take longer, but we need to arrive in one piece. The fleet slowed down and adjusted their formation. What should have been a straight flight through the wastes became a careful crawl through a cosmic minefield. Stellar storms appeared without warning, forcing the ships to change course. Radiation spikes happened every few hours, frying electronics that had to be replaced or repaired on the spot. Gravity wells pulled at the ships randomly, requiring constant course corrections. The crew worked around the clock. On the Valkyrie, Lieutenant Webb basically lived in the engineering section. He and his team performed repairs in real time, sometimes, while wearing radiation suits because the affected areas were too dangerous. Webb was exposed to more radiation in 2 days than most people experienced in a lifetime. He did not complain. He just kept working. The bridge crew on all 3 ships had to navigate manually. They could not trust the computers completely. Young officers who had trained on automated systems now had to use basic mathematics and visual observation. Lieutenant Beth Morgan on the Ranger spent 16 hours straight at the navigation console, calculating trajectories by hand. Her eyes were red and her hands were shaking, but she did not ask to be relieved. On the second day, the fleet lost communication with Earth. The interference from the wastes was too strong. They were completely isolated now. No backup was coming. No reinforcements were available. They were on their own in the most dangerous region of space, heading toward a battle they might not survive. Some crew members started to question the mission. It happened quietly in private conversations in the mess halls and crew quarters. Was this worth it? Would the Velans do the same for humans? Why were they risking their lives for people they had never met? Commander Lisa Hayes heard these questions during her rounds through the ship. She did not get angry. She understood the fear. She had been scared herself since they entered the wastes, but she also knew that fear could spread if it was not addressed. She called a meeting of the senior staff on the Valkyrie. Captain Grant, Lieutenant Webb, Sergeant Cross, and the other department heads gathered in the briefing room. Hayes stood at the head of the table and spoke plainly. I know people are scared. I know some are wondering if this mission makes sense. I want to address that directly. She activated a display showing data from Kasara 7. The Velen shields were failing faster than predicted. They had maybe 36 hours left. Every species in the galaxy is watching us right now. They want to see if we turn back. They want to confirm that we are just like them, that we only help when it is safe and profitable. They want us to fail because if we succeed, it proves they were wrong. Grant spoke up. So this is about proving something to the galaxy? Hayes shook her head. No. This is about 12,000 people who are going to die if we do not reach them. Everything else is secondary. But I will tell you what this mission will prove. It will prove what kind of species humanity is. Do we help only when it is easy? Or do we help because it is right? Sergeant Cross nodded. I will tell my Marines. They need to hear this. Webb sighed. My engineers are exhausted, but they will keep going. We did not come this far to quit now. The meeting ended, and the senior staff spread the message throughout the ship. The doubt did not disappear completely, but it was pushed back. The crew remembered why they were here. They had a job to do, and people were counting on them. On the third day, the Ranger detected something on their sensors. Ships, Krethax ships, scout vessels, probably sent to investigate the unusual readings in the wastes. Captain Morrison called Admiral Cole immediately. Sir, we have contacts. 3 Krethax scouts heading our way. Cole's response was instant. Engage and destroy. We cannot let them report back to the main fleet. Morrison smiled grimly. Understood. Ranger is moving to intercept. The frigate accelerated toward the Krethax scouts. The enemy ships were faster and more maneuverable in normal space, but this was not normal space. This was the Ember Wastes, where the environment was as deadly as any weapon. Morrison knew how to use that. He led the Krethax into an asteroid field that was being buffeted by gravitational anomalies. The asteroids were moving in unpredictable patterns, pulled by forces that made no sense. Morrison's crew had been navigating this chaos for 3 days. They knew how to read it. The Krethax did not. Lieutenant Morgan called out warnings as Morrison flew the Ranger between spinning rocks and sudden gravity wells. Asteroid on the left moving faster than predicted. Gravity spike in 30 seconds, radiation burst incoming. Morrison threaded his ship through the chaos like he was born to it. Behind him, the Krethax scouts tried to follow. One of them hit an asteroid that changed course at the last second. The ship exploded in a brief flash of light. The other 2 kept coming. Officer Kevin Brooks launched his electronic warfare attack. The virus he had designed hit the Krethax communication systems. It did not stop them, but it confused them. Their coordination broke down. They started firing at each other, thinking they were targeting the Ranger. Morrison took advantage of the confusion. The Ranger came around behind one of the scouts and fired every weapon at point-blank range. The Krethax ship shattered. The last scout tried to run, but a stellar storm appeared directly in its path. The radiation fried its systems, and it drifted dead in space. Morrison let out a breath. Contacts eliminated, returning to formation. Admiral Cole's voice came through. Well done, Ranger, but now they know something is in the wastes. We need to assume the main Krethax fleet will be ready for us. The human fleet continued forward. They were battered, exhausted, and running on backup systems. But they were still moving, still coming, still refusing to give up. On Kasara 7, Vessel Treen received a brief message that made it through the interference. It was only 3 words. Almost there, hold on. Treen gathered his people and told them. The humans were close. They just needed to survive a little longer. The Velen children asked what humans looked like. Nobody knew. But the adults told them that humans were warriors from a dangerous world. They were coming through a region of space that killed most ships. They were coming to fight the Krethax. They were coming to save people they had never met. The children thought humans sounded like heroes from stories. The adults hoped they were right. The human fleet emerged from the worst of the Ember Wastes on the morning of the 4th day. They had made it through. Barely. The Valkyrie had lost 60% of its sensor capability. The Ranger had hull damage in 3 sections. The Nomad was running on backup power. But they were alive, and they were here. Ahead of them lay Kasara 7, and surrounding the planet were hundreds of Krethax ships. The real battle was about to begin. The sight that greeted the human fleet was worse than anyone had expected. Hundreds of Krethax vessels filled the space around Kasara 7. They were all different sizes, from small fighters to massive battleships. All of them were focused on the planet below. The Velen shields were failing in multiple locations. Sections of the colony were already exposed to the vacuum of space. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the Valkyrie and studied the tactical display. Every calculation said this was impossible. They were outnumbered at least 50 to 1. The Krethax had complete control of the orbital space. Any sane military commander would retreat immediately. Cole was not feeling particularly sane right now. He opened the fleet-wide channel. All ships, listen carefully. We are not here to win. We are not here to destroy the Krethax fleet. We are here to buy time for an evacuation. Captain Grant, the Valkyrie will be our hammer. We are going to hit them hard and get their attention. Captain Morrison, the Ranger will provide electronic warfare and support, disrupt their communications and create chaos. Captain Foster, get the Nomad to the surface and start loading refugees. That is our only mission. Get the Velens out. Grant responded immediately. Understood, sir. Valkyrie is ready. Morrison's voice was calm. Ranger is in position. Foster sounded tense but determined. Nomad is prepared for combat landing. Cole took a deep breath. Then let us show these bastards what happens when you ignore a cry for help. All ships, attack formation, engage. The Valkyrie accelerated directly toward the Krethax fleet. It was an insane move, a single carrier charging hundreds of enemy ships. But that was exactly what Cole wanted. He needed the Krethax to focus on him, to forget about the planet for just a few minutes. The Krethax responded exactly as expected. They were a hive mind and they analyzed threats logically. The Valkyrie was the biggest ship, so it was the biggest threat. Dozens of Krethax vessels broke formation and moved to intercept. Captain Grant stood on her bridge and watched the enemy ships closing in. All fighters launch. Weapons free. Show them what human pilots can do. The Valkyrie's hangar bays opened and 50 fighters poured out. They were smaller than most alien fighters, but they were fast and heavily armed. The pilots had trained for this their entire careers. Now they flew into a battle that would decide whether humanity's reputation was built on courage or stupidity. Lieutenant Sarah Price led the first squadron. She was 26 and had more flight hours than most pilots twice her age. She dove her fighter straight into the Krethax formation, weapons blazing. Her wingman, Lieutenant Carl Hughes, followed her in. Together they tore through the enemy lines using tactics the Krethax had never seen. Human pilots did not fly in neat formations. They flew like they were insane. They used the proximity of enemy ships against them, flying so close that the Krethax could not fire without hitting each other. They used debris and explosions as cover. They took risks that made no mathematical sense but somehow worked. Behind the fighters, the Valkyrie pushed deeper into the enemy formation. Grant ordered her weapons crews to fire on anything that moved. The carrier was not designed for close-quarters combat, but Grant was using it like a battering ram. Krethax ships that got too close were destroyed by point-blank railgun fire. While the Valkyrie drew attention, the Ranger went to work. Captain Morrison brought his frigate around the edge of the battle and launched his electronic warfare attack. Officer Kevin Brooks unleashed his virus into the Krethax communication network. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The hive mind that coordinated the Krethax fleet suddenly started receiving false information. Ships that thought they were firing at human fighters were actually targeting their own vessels. Commands that should have coordinated the defense instead created confusion. The Krethax had never experienced anything like this. For thousands of years, their hive mind had been their greatest strength. Every ship knew what every other ship was doing. But now that strength became a weakness. When one ship was confused, the confusion spread. When one ship received false data, every connected ship questioned their own sensors. Morrison watched the chaos on his screens and allowed himself a small smile. Keep it up, Brooks. They do not know which way is up anymore. Brooks was sweating as he typed frantically. The virus is working better than I hoped, but they are trying to adapt. I can keep them confused for maybe 20 minutes before they figure out how to compensate. Morrison nodded. 20 minutes is all we need. Keep them busy. While the battle raged in orbit, the Nomad made its approach to the surface. Captain Foster took his ship down through atmosphere that was being torn apart by weapons fire. The heavy transport shuddered and shook, but it was built for this. Foster had flown through worse during the Mars campaigns. He brought the Nomad down near the main Velen bunker. The landing was hard and fast. Before the ship even finished settling, the rear ramp was opening. Sergeant Amy Cross led her Marines out at a run. They immediately established a defensive perimeter around the landing zone. Cross looked around at the devastation. The Velen colony had been beautiful once. Now it was a war zone. Buildings were destroyed. The ground was scorched. And in the distance she could see Krethak's ground forces moving toward their position. Defensive positions. "They are coming!" The Marines spread out and prepared to fight. They had trained for ground combat against alien species, but this was their first time facing the Krethaks. The enemy soldiers were insectoid with armored shells and multiple limbs. They moved fast and attacked in swarms. Private Danny Collins found himself next to Sergeant Cross behind a piece of debris. He was terrified but trying not to show it. Cross glanced at him. "You ready, Collins?" Collins checked his weapon. "I think so, Sergeant," Cross smiled. "Good. Remember your training. Aim for the joints in their armor, and do not let them surround you. Stay close to your squad." The Krethaks hit the defensive line like a wave. The Marines opened fire with everything they had. The sound was deafening. Bullets and energy weapons tore through the air. The first wave of Krethaks went down, but more kept coming. Collins fired his rifle in controlled bursts, just like he had been taught. He saw Krethak soldiers fall, but others took their place. Beside him, Cross fought with calm efficiency. She had done this before, and it showed. She called out targets and coordinated the defense. Inside the bunker, Captain Foster and Dr. Kim had entered to meet the Velens. The aliens were smaller than humans, with smooth skin and large eyes. They looked fragile and scared. Foster approached the one who seemed to be in charge. "I am Captain Ryan Foster of Earth. We are here to evacuate you." Vessel Treen stared at the human in amazement. Foster was tall and wore combat armor. He looked like a warrior from ancient stories. Treen reached out with trembling appendages and grasped Foster's hand. "You came. You actually came." Foster's voice was gentle. "We heard you. Now we need to move fast." "How many people are in this bunker?" Treen looked around at his people. 12,000, including children. Foster nodded. "My ship can carry 2,000 at a time. We will need to make multiple trips. We start with the children and the wounded. Can you organize your people?" Treen straightened up. Despite his fear, he was still a leader. "Yes, we will be ready." Dr. Kim started triaging the wounded Velens. She had no idea about their biology, but she was adapting quickly. "Captain, some of these injuries are serious. I will do what I can, but I am working blind here." Foster put a hand on her shoulder. "Do your best, Doctor. That is all anyone can ask." Outside, the battle continued. The Marines were holding the line, but barely. The Krethaks kept coming in endless waves. Cross was starting to worry about ammunition when she heard a sound she did not expect. Laughter. Private Collins was laughing as he fired his weapon. Not crazy laughter. Determined laughter. "Is that all you got?" He shouted at the Krethaks. "We came through the ember wastes for this?" Cross grinned despite the situation. The kid was going to be fine. Hell, they were all going to be fine. They were human. They did not know how to quit. She raised her voice so all the Marines could hear. "You heard the private. We did not fly through hell itself to lose to these bugs. Hold the line." The Marines roared back and fought harder. In orbit, the Valkyrie was taking heavy damage but still fighting. The Ranger was running circles around the confused Krethak's fleet. And on the ground, the Nomad was loading its first group of refugees. The impossible rescue mission was actually working. For now. The evacuation became a desperate race against time. The Nomad could only carry 2,000 Velens per trip. With 12,000 refugees total, that meant at least 6 runs. Each run took time to load, time to reach orbit, time to transfer the refugees to the Valkyrie's safer internal sections, and time to return. Time they did not have. Captain Foster pushed his ship as hard as it could go. The first load of refugees, mostly children and elderly Velens, was secured in the cargo holds. Dr. Kim and her medical team moved among them, providing care and comfort. The Velen children stared at the human doctors with wide eyes. The humans looked scary, with their sharp features and aggressive movements, but they were gentle with the wounded. One small Velen child grabbed Dr. Kim's hand as she worked. The child spoke in broken standard language. "Are we safe now?" Kim looked at the child and felt her heart break a little. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to promise that everything would be fine. But she was a doctor, and doctors did not lie. "We are going to try very hard to keep you safe. That is a promise." The child seemed satisfied with that answer. Trust was strange that way. Sometimes just knowing someone was trying was enough. The Nomad lifted off from the surface with its first load of refugees. Behind it, Sergeant Cross and her Marines continued to hold the defensive perimeter. The Krethax had committed more forces to the ground assault. They had realized that stopping the evacuation was more important than anything else. Cross's Marines were down to 60% ammunition. They were rationing their shots now, making every bullet count. Private Collins had stopped laughing. He was focused and efficient, dropping Krethax soldiers with precise fire. Next to him, Corporal Pete Johnson was wounded but still fighting. A Krethax blade had cut through his armor and left a deep gash in his leg. He refused to go back to the bunker. "I can still shoot," Johnson said when Cross tried to order him back. "You need every gun out here." Cross did not argue. He was right. She did need every gun. "Stay in cover then, and if you bleed out, I am writing you up for disobeying orders." Johnson grinned through his pain. "Yes, Sergeant." In orbit, the battle had turned into a brutal slugging match. The Valkyrie was taking hits from multiple directions. Admiral Cole had positioned his ship to draw as much fire as possible, and the Krethax were happy to oblige. The carrier's armor was holding, but barely. Entire sections were exposed to vacuum. Half the weapon systems were offline. But the Valkyrie kept fighting. Captain Grant stood on her bridge, which was filling with smoke from damaged systems. Lieutenant Webb's voice came through the communication system, and he sounded exhausted. "Captain, we are losing structural integrity in sections 4 through 7. I am sealing those areas and rerouting power, but we cannot take much more punishment." Grant nodded. "Keep us together, Webb. We just need a few more hours." Webb laughed bitterly. "A few more hours. Sure, no problem." Commander Lisa Hayes was coordinating damage control teams throughout the ship. She moved from section to section, organizing repairs and evacuating damaged areas. In one corridor, she found a group of crew members trapped behind a collapsed bulkhead. She grabbed a plasma cutter and started cutting through the debris herself. A young ensign named Katie Wells was crying on the other side of the debris. Hayes called through to her. "Wells, I need you to stay calm. We are cutting through now." Wells's voice was shaky. "Commander, we are running out of air in here." Hayes cut faster. "Then make every breath count. We are almost there." She broke through the debris and pulled Wells and 3 other crew members out. They were all injured but alive. Hayes sent them to the medical bay and moved on to the next crisis. There was always another crisis. The fighter pilots were performing miracles in the space around the Valkyrie. Lieutenant Sarah Price had lost half her squadron, but the survivors were fighting like they had nothing to lose. She dove her fighter through a gap between 2 Krethax cruisers and fired a missile at point-blank range. The explosion caught both enemy ships and damaged them badly. Her wingman, Lieutenant Carl Hughes, stayed on her wing through every impossible maneuver. His voice came through the communication channel. "Price, we have 3 more on our tail." Price flipped her fighter in a maneuver that should not have been possible. She came around behind the pursuing Krethax fighters and destroyed 2 of them. The third one tried to run, but Hughes got it with a perfect shot. "That is what I am talking about," Hughes shouted. Price allowed herself a brief smile. "Stay sharp. We are not done yet." The Ranger was still causing chaos throughout the Krethax fleet. Captain Morrison had turned his ship into a ghost, appearing and disappearing from the enemy sensors. Officer Brooks kept the electronic warfare attack going, even though he was nearly passing out from exhaustion. The virus had evolved into something more complex, adapting to Krethax countermeasures in real time. Lieutenant Beth Morgan, the navigation officer, called out a warning. "Captain, they are trying to cut us off. 3 cruisers moving to block our escape route." Morrison grinned. "They think we are trying to escape. Let us show them what we are really doing. He turned his ship directly toward the cruisers and accelerated. The Ranger was smaller and faster than the enemy ships. Morrison flew between them, weapons blazing. The confused Krethax cruisers fired at the Ranger, but ended up hitting each other instead. On the surface, the Nomad returned for its second load of refugees. Captain Foster brought his ship down even faster than before. The landing was rougher, but he did not care about rough. He cared about fast. The rear ramp dropped and more Velans rushed aboard. Vessel Treen was organizing the evacuation with impressive efficiency. He made sure families stayed together. He prioritized the wounded and the young. He kept everyone calm despite the sounds of battle outside. When Foster told him it was time for him to leave, Treen refused. "I am the leader, I leave last." Foster understood that. He would have done the same thing. "Then help me load the others faster. We are running out of time." Treen nodded and kept working. Around them, Velan parents clutched their children and hurried onto the human ship. They were terrified, but they trusted these strange warriors from Earth. The humans had come when nobody else would. That trust was earned. Outside the bunker, Sergeant Cross saw something that made her blood run cold. The Krethax were bringing up heavy weapons, not the small arms they had been using, real artillery designed to crack bunkers. "We have a problem," she shouted. "Heavy weapons incoming." The Marines focused their fire on the artillery units, but there were too many. One of the Krethax guns got a shot off. The explosive round hit near the defensive line and threw Marines in all directions. Cross was slammed into a wall and felt ribs crack. Private Collins was buried under debris. Corporal Johnson took shrapnel to his chest and went down hard. Cross struggled to her feet. Everything hurt, but she had to keep moving. She pulled Collins out of the rubble. He was bleeding from his head but still conscious. "Can you fight?" Collins nodded weakly. "Yes, Sergeant." Cross grabbed his rifle and handed it back to him. "Then get back on that line. We are not done." She moved to Johnson and checked his pulse. Nothing. The corporal was gone. Cross felt a surge of rage. She picked up Johnson's weapon, stood up, and started firing at the Krethax with both rifles. She was shouting, though she did not remember what words she used. Her Marines saw her and rallied. If the sergeant could still fight, then so could they. The Nomad lifted off with its second load of refugees. 10,000 left. 4 more trips. The ship was taking fire as it climbed through the atmosphere, but Foster kept it steady. In the cargo holds, Dr. Kim was treating a Velan child with severe burns. She did not know Velan biology, but burns were burns. She cleaned the wounds and applied synthetic skin. The child might survive. That was all she could do. In orbit, the Krethax were finally adapting to the human tactics. They brought in reinforcements and started coordinating better. The Valkyrie could not take much more damage. The Ranger was starting to run low on ammunition. The fighters were down to their last missiles. Admiral Cole looked at the tactical display and made calculations. They might have enough time for the remaining evacuation runs. Might. It was going to be very close. The Galactic Council was receiving live feeds of the battle. Species that had refused to help now watched in stunned silence as humanity held the line. The Thessian delegate whispered to her aide, "How are they doing this? The probability of success was nearly 0. The Prylon observer studied the data with its emotionless eyes. They are succeeding because they refuse to fail. The humans do not care about probability. They care about the mission. The Korvax military representative watched the human tactics with professional respect. They fight well, better than I expected. But they cannot hold much longer. The numbers are against them. On Kasara 7, Vessel Treen helped load the third group of refugees onto the Nomad. He looked at Captain Foster, this human warrior who had come so far to save people he had never met. "Why?" Treen asked. "Why did you come when nobody else would?" Foster looked at him and gave a simple answer. "Because you needed help." Treen did not fully understand, but he knew enough. Humans were different. That difference might just save his entire species. The 4th and 5th evacuation runs went faster than expected. Captain Foster pushed the Nomad harder than the ship was designed for. The engines were screaming, and Lieutenant Webb warned that they were close to catastrophic failure. Foster did not care. Speed was survival now. Every minute they saved meant more Vellans would live. On the ground, Sergeant Cross's defensive line was collapsing. Her Marines were down to 30% strength. Half were wounded. They were out of ammunition for the heavy weapons. They were using whatever they could find, including Krethak's weapons taken from fallen enemies. Cross herself was running on pure determination. Her ribs were definitely broken, and she was pretty sure she had a concussion, but she was still standing, still fighting, still leading. Private Collins had become a different person during the battle. The nervous kid was gone. In his place was a hardened soldier who killed Krethaks with cold efficiency. He had stopped counting how many he had dropped. He just kept firing until his weapon clicked empty, then found another weapon and kept going. The Krethaks were bringing everything they had against the defensive position. They knew the evacuation was almost complete. If they could break through now, they could still stop it. Thousands of Krethak soldiers charged the human line in a massive wave. Cross looked at her remaining Marines. 23 out of 50. All wounded, all exhausted, all still fighting. She raised her voice over the sound of weapons fire. This is it. This is what we came for. Hold this line for 10 more minutes and those people get away. 10 minutes. You can do anything for 10 minutes. The Marines roared back and threw themselves into the fight. They did not have enough ammunition for a sustained defense. They did not have enough people to cover all the gaps. They did not have anything except will and courage. Sometimes that was enough. In orbit, the situation was even worse. The Valkyrie had taken catastrophic damage. Entire sections of the ship were gone. Life support was failing in multiple areas. The weapon systems were down to 20% capacity. Captain Grant had ordered all non-essential crew to evacuation pods, but she and her core team stayed at their posts. Admiral Cole stood on the damaged bridge and looked at the tactical situation. The Ranger and the remaining fighters were still in the fight, but they were running on fumes. The Nomad was making its final run to the surface. They just needed a little more time, but the Krethaks had committed their entire fleet to destroying the human ships. Time was the one thing they did not have. Cole made a decision. It was the kind of decision that ended careers or ended lives, usually both. He called Commander Hayes to the bridge. She arrived within a minute, covered in soot and blood. Sir, Cole pointed at the tactical display. We need to buy the Nomad 15 more minutes. Time to reach the surface, load the last refugees, and get clear. The Krethaks are going to throw everything at us to prevent that. Hayes looked at the display and understood immediately what Cole was planning. You want to use the Valkyrie as a weapon? Cole nodded. The ship is done anyway, but the reactor is still intact. If we position ourselves correctly and overload the reactor, we can take out a significant portion of their fleet. It will create a gap for the Ranger and Nomad to escape. Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then she straightened up. Permission to stay aboard, sir. You will need someone to pilot this ship while you coordinate, and someone needs to make sure the reactor overload happens at exactly the right moment. Cole looked at her. Hayes had been with him for 5 years. She was one of the best officers he had ever worked with. He did not want her to die, but he also knew she was right. This needed to be done correctly, and they were the best people to do it. Permission granted, Commander. He opened the fleet-wide channel. This is Admiral Cole to all ships. The Valkyrie is staying to cover the final evacuation. Captain Morrison, get the Ranger clear as soon as the Nomad is loaded. Captain Foster, this is your last run. Make it count. Captain Grant, order all remaining crew to evacuation pods immediately. Grant's voice came back firm. Negative, Admiral. My bridge crew is staying. This is our ship. Cole wanted to argue, but he understood. He would have made the same choice. Understood, Captain. It has been an honor. Lieutenant Marcus Webb's voice came through from engineering. He sounded exhausted but determined. Admiral, I can rig the reactor to overload on your command. But whoever sets this off will not be leaving. You understand that, right? Cole nodded even though Webb could not see him. I understand. Do it. Webb started working on the reactor controls. Around him, his engineering team continued to make repairs, keeping the ship functional for just a few more minutes. They all knew they were not leaving. They had known since Cole announced his plan. But they kept working anyway because that was what you did. You finished the job. On the surface, the Nomad made its final landing. Captain Foster brought his ship down in the middle of a battlefield. Sergeant Cross and her Marines were barely holding the perimeter. Foster opened the rear ramp and shouted into his communication system, "This is the last ride. Everyone on board right now." The remaining Velans rushed onto the ship. Vesseltrine helped the last families aboard, then turned to run back toward the bunker. Foster grabbed him. "What are you doing?" Trine pointed at the bunker. "We have 12 people still inside, wounded who could not be moved earlier. I am not leaving them," Foster cursed. "We do not have time for another run. Stay here." He grabbed 2 of his crew members. "You 2 with me. We are getting those people." They ran into the bunker while the Nomads' defensive guns covered them. Inside, they found the wounded Velans. They were in bad shape, but they were alive. Foster and his crew picked them up and carried them. It should have taken multiple trips, but they did it in one. They ran back to the ship while Krethak's fire tore up the ground around them. Foster practically threw the wounded Velans onto the Nomad and then shouted at Sergeant Cross, "Get your people on board right now." Cross was still firing at the approaching Krethaks. "We need to cover your takeoff." Foster grabbed her shoulder. "You have done enough. Get on the ship." Cross looked at the Krethaks, then at her Marines, then at the ship. She made the call. "Marines, fall back to the Nomad. Fighting retreat, move." The Marines backed toward the ship, firing as they went. Private Collins was the last one to reach the ramp. He turned and fired one more burst at the Krethaks, then ran up the ramp. "Go, go, go!" The Nomad lifted off with Krethak's fire hitting its hull. Foster pushed the engines to maximum and climbed as fast as the ship could handle. In the cargo holds, Dr. Kim was thrown against a wall as the ship shook. She held onto a Velan child to keep the kid from being injured. Around her, thousands of refugees held onto whatever they could as the ship accelerated. In orbit, Admiral Cole watched the Nomad clear the atmosphere. The last refugees were safe. Now came the hard part. He looked at Commander Hayes. "Take us in." Hayes piloted the damaged Valkyrie directly into the heart of the Krethaks formation. The enemy ships were converging, sensing victory. They did not realize what the humans were planning. Captain Grant coordinated the last of their weapons fire, taking down as many Krethak ships as possible. Lieutenant Beth Morgan had transferred from the Ranger to help with the final calculations. She was exhausted, scared, and knew she was about to die, but she kept working on the navigation console, making sure they were positioned exactly right. "Sir, we are at optimal position. The reactor overload will create maximum effect here." Lieutenant Webb's voice came through from engineering. "Reactor is ready, Admiral. Give the word and we go out with a very big bang." Admiral Cole activated the fleet-wide channel one last time. "This is Admiral Vincent Cole. To all ships, get clear of our position immediately. To the crew of the Valkyrie, it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. What we did here today mattered. Those 12,000 people are alive because of us. Remember that." He looked around his bridge. Commander Hayes at the helm, Captain Grant at tactical, Lieutenant Morgan at navigation, a dozen others at their stations. All of them had stayed. All of them knew this was the end. He was proud of every single one of them. Cole turned to Hayes. "Any last words, Commander?" Hayes smiled. It was a real smile, not forced. "Yeah, tell the galaxy that this is what humans do. We do not leave people behind." Cole nodded. "That is a good one." He looked at the tactical display. The Ranger and Nomad were clear. The refugees were safe. It was time. "Lieutenant Webb, initiate reactor overload." Webb's response was immediate. "Overload initiated. 30 seconds to detonation." Captain Grant broadcast on all frequencies, making sure every Krethak ship and every Galactic Council observer heard her. "This is Captain Nicole Grant of the EDS Valkyrie. To the Krethaks, you picked the wrong species to mess with. To the galaxy, this is what humans do. We do not abandon people who need help." Admiral Cole added his own message. "And we do not lose when it matters most." The Valkyrie's reactor reached critical mass. The explosion was massive, a miniature sun that appeared in space for a brief moment. The blast wave tore through the Krethak's formation, destroying dozens of ships instantly. Hundreds more were damaged or disabled. The entire fleet coordination broke down as the hive mind tried to process what had just happened. The journey back to civilized space was quiet. The Ranger and the Nomad limped through the ember waste together, their hulls scarred and their crews exhausted. Captain Jake Morrison had lost 60% of his crew. Captain Ryan Foster had lost fewer people, but his ship was barely holding together. Behind them, Cassara 7 was a memory, and the Valkyrie was gone. In the cargo holds of the Nomad, 12,000 Velen refugees tried to process what had happened. They were alive. Against all odds, against all probability, they had been saved. But the cost had been terrible. They had watched human ships die to protect them. They had seen human warriors fall defending the evacuation. The Velens were a peaceful species. They had never seen such violence, such sacrifice, such determination. Bessel Treen sat in one of the cargo holds with his people around him. A Velen child asked him a question that had no easy answer. Why did the humans do that? Why did they die for us? Treen thought about Captain Foster running into the bunker for the wounded. He thought about Sergeant Cross holding the line with broken ribs. He thought about Admiral Cole positioning his ship for that final explosion. He looked at the child and spoke honestly. Because we asked for help and they answered. That is what humans do. The child did not fully understand, but Treen knew that someday they would. Someday this child would tell their own children about the day demons from Earth came through fire and death to save them. The story would pass down through generations. Humanity would be remembered. Dr. Laura Kim moved through the cargo hold, still treating wounded. She had been working non-stop for days. Her medical team was equally exhausted, but there were still patients who needed care. She found Sergeant Amy Cross sitting against a wall, holding her ribs and trying not to show how much pain she was in. Kim sat down next to her. Let me check those ribs. Cross tried to wave her off. I am fine, Doc. Check on the Velens first. Kim gave her a look that said she was not asking. The Velens are stable. You have at least 3 broken ribs and probably internal bleeding. Let me work. Cross sighed and let Kim examine her. The doctor was efficient and gentle. After a few minutes, Kim sat back. You need surgery when we get back to Earth, but you will live. Cross nodded. Good enough. She looked at Kim. How many did we lose on the ground? Kim's voice was quiet. 27 Marines did not make it onto the Nomad, including Corporal Johnson. Cross closed her eyes. She had known Johnson for 3 years. Good soldier. Good friend, gone. She would grieve later. Right now, she just needed to get everyone home. What about the Velens? How many wounded? Kim checked her notes. About 800 have significant injuries. I have been improvising treatments based on trial and error. Some will need more advanced care than I can provide, but most should survive. Cross looked at the refugees filling the cargo hold. 12,000. We actually got them all out. Kim smiled tiredly. We did, thanks to a lot of brave people. The 2 ships emerged from the Ember Wastes 2 days later. They were met by an Earth Defense Force escort that had been waiting at the edge. The escort commander looked at the state of the Ranger and Nomad and did not hide his shock. Captain Morrison, what happened to your ships? Morrison's response was short. We went to Kasara 7. Mission accomplished. The fleet returned to civilized space and news spread quickly. The human ships had actually done it. They had rescued the Velens, but the cost had been heavy. The Valkyrie was destroyed. 48 crew members were dead, including Admiral Cole, Captain Grant, and Commander Hayes. Dozens more were wounded. The Galactic Council called an emergency session to discuss the incident. Captain Morrison was summoned to give his report. He stood before the council chamber, still wearing his damaged uniform. He had not slept in 3 days. He did not care about protocol or diplomacy right now. He cared about making sure everyone understood what had happened. The Thessian ambassador spoke first, her voice attempting to be diplomatic. Captain Morrison, we acknowledge the courage shown by your people. The rescue of the Velens was unexpected. However, we must discuss the strategic implications of Earth acting unilaterally, without council approval. Morrison looked at her with barely controlled anger. With respect, Ambassador, we did not act unilaterally. We responded to a distress call that was broadcast to everyone, a call that this council chose to ignore. The Korvax representative spoke next. The risk was too high. Your losses prove that. Morrison stepped forward. Yes, we took losses. 48 good people died, but 12,000 Velens lived. That is not a failure. That is what success looks like when you actually care about saving lives instead of calculating acceptable losses. The Prylon observer spoke in its emotionless voice. Your success was improbable. Our models predicted complete failure. Morrison smiled without humor. Your models do not account for one thing. Humans do not quit. We do not care about your probabilities or your calculations. The Velens called for help. That was all we needed to know. The council chamber was silent. Morrison continued, his voice carrying to every representative. We did not do this for your approval. We did not do this for political advantage. We did it because it was right. Because those people needed help. And we were the only ones who answered. If that makes us fools in your eyes, we will accept that. But those 12,000 Velans are alive because of us. The Thessian ambassador tried again. Captain, we are merely trying to understand Earth's intentions. This action has changed the political landscape. Other species are watching. Morrison turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. Good, let them watch. Let them see what happens when you call Earth for help. We will come. We will fight. We will bleed. And we will save whoever needs saving. That is what humanity is. If the rest of you have a problem with that, honestly, we do not care. He left the chamber without being dismissed. It was a breach of protocol. The council representatives looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Some were offended. Some were thoughtful. Some were afraid of what this new species represented. The Velans did not wait for the council to make a decision. Within a week, Vesseltrine submitted a formal petition to leave the Galactic Council's protection and join Earth's sphere of influence. He appeared before the council with a statement that was broadcast across all known space. My people called for help in our darkest hour. The Galactic Council debated and calculated and ultimately did nothing. Earth heard our cry and sent ships. Earth sent soldiers. Earth sent people who were willing to die for strangers. We watched humans fight against impossible odds. We watched them hold the line when any sane military force would have retreated. We watched them sacrifice themselves so that we could live. Trine's voice grew stronger. The galaxy calls them demons. The galaxy calls them reckless. The galaxy calls them fools. But these demons carried my children to safety. These fools bled for people they had never met. If Earth's demons are the only ones who answer when we cry for help, then we choose Earth. The statement sent shockwaves through the galactic community. Several other species, mostly smaller ones without powerful militaries, began to question the Galactic Council's value. What was the point of a council that would not act when needed? What was the point of rules and protocols when people were dying? Earth's reputation changed overnight. Before Kasara 7, humans were seen as an interesting but minor species. Young, aggressive, possibly dangerous. After Kasara 7, humans were seen as something else entirely. A species that would fly into hell itself to save strangers. A species that put morality above calculation. A species that scared the established powers because they did not follow the rules everyone else accepted. 3 more distress calls came in the following weeks. Each time the Galactic Council debated and delayed. Each time Earth sent ships before the debates concluded. Each time humans saved people that others had written off as acceptable losses. The pattern became clear. When someone needed help, call Earth. The demons would answer. On Earth itself, memorials were built for the crew of the Valkyrie. The main memorial was in Geneva, at the headquarters of the unified Earth government. A wall listed every name of those who had died. Above the names was a simple inscription that captured everything about that mission. They heard the cry for help that others ignored. They went where others feared to go. They saved those others called unsavable. This is humanity. Admiral Vincent Cole was promoted posthumously and inducted into Earth's Military Hall of Heroes. Captain Nicole Grant received the same honor. Commander Lisa Hayes, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, Lieutenant Beth Morgan, and every crew member who died on the Valkyrie were remembered. Their sacrifice became the foundation of Earth's growing reputation. 6 months after Kasara 7, the Krethax launched a major offensive against multiple targets. It was a coordinated attack designed to capture several resource-rich systems. The Krethax had not forgotten their defeat at Kasara 7. They wanted revenge. More than that, they wanted to prove that humans were just lucky once. The Galactic Council received intelligence about the coming offensive weeks in advance. They held emergency sessions. They debated responses. They calculated risks. And in the end, they did something unprecedented. Every species, every representative, every observer voted the same way. They sent a formal request for military,